The US President Donald Trump says Russia and Ukraine will immediately start ceasefire negotiations after a 2-hour phone call with Russian President Vladimir Putin. Let's bring in our North America correspondent Carrington Clark, who is in Washington for us, and our Europe correspondent Elias Kluwer in London. Good morning to you both. Carrington, to you first. Just tell us, what do we know about the call?
Well, I think any hope that we might see a major breakthrough in the stalled ceasefire negotiations between Ukraine and Russia have been dashed by this phone call. There was a certain level of anticipation about Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin speaking for the first time since March. And although the US president has tried to put a positive spin on this conversation, taking to social media to say that Russia and Ukraine will immediately start negotiations towards a ceasefire and an end to that 3-year-old war, there weren't really any concrete steps being outlined about exactly how that might take place. Earlier, we'd seen the Russian President Vladimir Putin say that efforts to end the war were generally on the right track and that Moscow was ready to work with Ukraine on a potential peace deal. But Donald Trump seemed more focused on the potential for economic cooperation between the United States and Russia, suggesting there could be trade between the two countries, and seemed to be offering that more as a carrot than potentially hitting Russia with further sanctions. The stick that people had been suggesting, including him, might be used in order to get Russia serious about these negotiations. Remember, we've just seen Ukraine and Russian officials meet in Istanbul in the hope that they could get closer to a deal. Nothing came of that, and really very little seems to have come from this conversation. Donald Trump is suggesting that perhaps the Vatican could be involved in the ceasefire negotiations, that they are willing to host such conversations, but really nothing concrete. But this was the US president speaking a little while after this more than 2-hour-long phone call from the White House Rose Garden.
So hopefully we did something. We also spoke to the heads of most of the European nations, and we're trying to get that whole thing wrapped up.
That's Donald Trump there speaking in the Rose Garden. And Elias, to you now. Has there been any reaction from the Ukrainian president or other European leaders who, in the past, have felt cut out of some of these discussions?
Well, as you heard there from Donald Trump, he informed most European leaders of the phone call with Vladimir Putin. But there has been a general sense among European leaders, particularly those within the coalition of the willing, that Russia isn't particularly serious about a ceasefire deal or peace in general in Ukraine. Now, analysts we've spoken to have gone further and say that Moscow really doesn't believe it's in their best interest to end the war because they feel they have the initiative on the battleground. But as for Volodymyr Zelenskyy, the Ukrainian president, well, he's continually said that the demands and the conditions around the ceasefire that Russia is asking for are unrealistic. And as long as those sticking points remain, then they remain at an impasse. They revolve particularly or specifically around regions that Russia is demanding be considered Russian territory, like Crimea, which was illegally annexed by Russia in 2014. That being said, though, the Ukrainian president said he is open to those negotiations and talks. Let's have a listen to what he said a little bit earlier.
We are considering a meeting of all teams again. We would like it to be at a high level. America, Ukraine, Russia, European countries and Great Britain. Such a meeting could take place in Turkey, the Vatican or Switzerland.
So there you go, the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy saying that he's open to a meeting, whether it be at the Vatican, Turkey or Switzerland, but whether the Russian President, Vladimir Putin, agrees to this and decides to go remains a different story. And after the 2-hour meeting between him and the US President, it doesn't seem that we have any clearer idea of whether that will happen, guys.